first of the TAC Funding and Programming Committee. First, we will look for approval of the agenda. Do any members have any changes to the agenda? Right, and Bradley, if you see a hand raised, please let me know. I don't see any changes, so we will move forward with the agenda. Next on the is the approval of the July 20th minutes. Any discussion?
Elaine Kutsukos moves approval of the minutes.
All right, thank you, Elaine. We got a first. Do we have a second?
Scott Merrick, second.
All right, thank you, Scott. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will move to roll call.
Okay, sorry, I was just getting all my stuff set up here. Okay, Anoka County. And I didn't get a full attendance taken, so if you could tell me who's here for Anoka County.
Yep, I'm Jack Forrest and I'm here for Jerry OJ.
Right, thank you. Carver County?
Darren Melke here.
And is that an aye for the minutes?
I'll abstain from the minutes. I wasn't at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Dakota County? Hearing none for now. We'll circle back. Hennepin County?
This is Jason Piper. Aye.
Thank you, Jason. Ramsey County? Do we have Scott on the call?
Aye.
Thank you. Scott County?
Adam Jessen, aye.
Thank you. Washington County? Maddie Dahlheimer or Alyssa Leitner? Bloomington, Carl Keel? Robert Ellis, Eden Prairie?
Aye.
Thank you. Fridley, do we have Jim on the call?
It's Brandon Brodhig for Jim Kosucher. Aye.
Thank you, Brandon. Lakeville, Paul Omi?
Aye.
Thank you. Maple Grove? We have Ken. Minneapolis Engineering, Nathan Coster or Kathleen Mayo?
Nathan Coster is not here today. This is Katie White. I'll abstain since I wasn't here last time.
Okay, thank you. Plymouth, Michael Thompson?
Aye.
Thank you. St. Paul Engineering, Ann Weber? Metro Transit, Scott Chinowiak?
Scott Chinowiak here. Aye.
Thank you. Suburban Transit?
This is Matt Fighting here for Heidi Scholl. I'll abstain as I wasn't there.
Okay, thank you. DNR, Nancy Spooner Walsh? MnDOT Bike and Ped, is it Mackenzie Turner Bargan or Mike Samuelson?
This is Mike. I vote aye.
Mike. MnDOT Metro District, Aaron Tagg?
Aye.
Thank you. MnDOT State Aid, Colleen Brown?
Aye.
Thank you. Innocent AO, MPCA?
Aye.
Is it Cole Henniker, Met Council MTS?
Aye.
And Elaine Kutsukos, Tab Coordinator.
Aye.
Right, thank you. Chair, motion passes.
All right, thank you, Bradley. Next on the agenda is public comment on committee business. Did we have anyone for public comment?
Chair, we did not.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move on to the TAB report. Elaine?
Thank you, Chair. TAB met yesterday afternoon. Chair Hovland reported on the Metropolitan Council Governance Task Force, which is made up of legislators, county representatives, and one city representative, who is Jim Hovland. And he will provide updates as they meet. Hovland attended the U.S. Conference of Mayors leadership meeting in San Diego. He reported as the chair of the Standing Committee on Transportation. One of U.S. DOT's areas of emphasis is Vision Zero. If anyone is interested in a Vision Zero project in your community, let him know, and he will pass you on to MnDOT for resources. Hovland will be visiting with MnDOT regarding IIJA funding opportunities for communities for assistance in grant writing. For the MnDOT report, Michael Barnes reported on statewide and metro area traffic fatalities. To date, in 2023, there have been 283 deaths statewide compared to 324 in 2022. In the metro area, there have been 92 deaths compared to a 3-year average of 104. This week is Child Passenger Safety Week. For the Minnesota Freight Program, applications are due October 13. There is approximately $21 million per year for the years 2026, 27, and 28. And then also MnDOT is submitting a grant application for the Highway 55 corridor for reconnecting communities and neighbors grant program. There's also an IIJA federal grant program released on September 13th on electric vehicle charging reliability. The deadline is November 13th. Also, Mike Barnes reported that he will be retiring on October 10th. And there's currently a notice out for his replacement. There was a request from the TAB members on request for information from law enforcement on driver behavior that is causing accidents. Also, in 2023 legislative session, there was an advisory council on traffic safety setup made up of 30 members, including Commissioner Jepson. The advisory council will serve as a lead to the TZD program, and the first meeting is scheduled September 21st today. For the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, Todd Bewan reported that the EPA released 2 notices of federal funding opportunities, announcing competitions for $4.6 billion in implementation grant funding under the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants Program. The $4.3 billion general competition is open to states, municipalities, tribes, and territories, and $300 million to tribes and territories. Available only to tribes and the territories. The application periods are now open and will close April 1st, 2024 for the general competition and then May 1st for the tribes and territories competition. EPA will hold 2 informational webinars about the general competition on September 21st at 2:30 p.m. and October 3rd, 3 p.m. and informational webinars and tribes and territories competition on September 27th and October 5th. These 1-hour webinars will provide more detailed information on the implementation grant competitions. And then recordings of the webinars will be posted on the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants webpage. There was no report for the Metropolitan Airports Commission. For Metropolitan Council report, Deb Barber reported that the council approved the release of the regional solicitation. Also, members of the Chesapeake Connect, a program of the Baltimore Metropolitan Council, will visit our metro area. Metro Transit provided 241,000 express rides to the state fair on 100 buses per day, which is a 33% increase over 2022. Also, the A-Line had a 50% growth over 2022 to the fair. The Suburban Transit Association, Gary Hansen reported that Maple Grove's microtransit service, MyRide, is thriving. Maple Grove is using funds allocated by the legislature for the addition of more microtransit vehicles. MyRide is performing stronger than pre-pandemic, 12% increase. And express service is up 20% over 22, but still lower than pre-pandemic. U of M ridership level is back to regular ridership numbers. Southwest Transit Express service is up 23% from 2022, with Prime up 39%. MBTA State Fair's ridership was nearly 113,000 riders, an agency record. And in Renaissance Festival, ridership is over 2,000 rides each weekend. And MBTA is ordering expansion microtransit buses to meet demand and is hiring a chief operating officer. For business items, TAB approves the adoption of the 2024 Unified Planning Work Program. And then they heard 2 information items, an update on the urban freight distribution study. There's questions on this study and mainly what e-commerce was covered. And for this study, e-commerce focused on the last mile delivery of parcels. And then Cole Hineker presented an update on the objectives of the transportation policy plan and the committee activities for the technical work group and the advisory work group for the goals. And TAB members requested ongoing discussion on those items. And that is all I have.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Any questions for Elaine? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Elaine. Appreciate it. Next, we'll move on to our regular business today. First item is TIP amendment for new TPP projects. And I believe, Joe, you'll be presenting this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am going to try to take control of this screen. Bradley, is that okay?
Go for it.
All right. Let's see if that goes. What's up there?
That's your email. So it looks like you're sharing your full screen with us.
How about now?
We can see the business item.
All right. Sorry about that. I thought I was grabbing the other screen. Grab this email to read off of as well. So on this item, 2023-45 is a TIP amendment request. You might remember a while back you approved or recommended approval of 5 projects to amend the TPP. And these are all regionally significant projects that were recently approved. 4 of those 5 projects were from the Quarters of Commerce funding, and then 1 was a locally funded project from Scott County. So those projects each at some point in time will need to be in the TIP. And right now we're sharing 2 of those that have a little bit more of an urgent need timing-wise to get into the TIP. Actually, sometimes when we amend the TPP, we would actually do these things at the same time, but it's kind of a funny time of year with the TIP, the 2024 through 2027 TIP being just recently approved by the council and not yet approved by the USDOT. So that's why there's a little bit of lag here, and then we're doing 2 of the 5. But these 2 projects are, the first one is from I-90, it's from Wright County on I-94. And here it is. I'll show a map of where it's at. And I know seeing a TIP amendment from Wright County is a little bit unusual, but that is in the area known as 7W that per the census actually back in 2010 is part of our MPO area. And this was a Quarters of Commerce funded project for widening about an 8-mile stretch of Interstate 94 pictured here. And the next one is Scott County. Here it is, and this is an interchange project on US 169 at CASA 59, also known as Delaware Avenue. And it's an entirely locally funded project, but it does need to be in the TIP because all regionally significant projects do, regardless of funding source. And so, since these have been discussed in the TPP topic, I don't think we need to get too into it. But I am here for questions if anybody has any. The last thing I'll mention is that at a staff level, we talked recently about rethinking the way that we do this motion. So what this motion says here, and how we've sort of always written these in the past, is that we want to approve this for release for public comment. Because they are regionally significant, they need to be released for public comment. But you don't actually see these again. Therefore, we're actually going to be releasing these for, we're going to be recommending approval and release for public comment, and we're going to name the projects. So I am going to work the proposed updated motion into here on the screen there. So if somebody could make that motion, that is what staff would like to see. With that, I'd stand for questions about the process or about the tip.
All right, thank you, Joe. Any questions or discussion on this item?
I have a question or a comment. Joe, you were on vacation and we talked about the Scott County tip amendment being shown as a MnDOT SP number, and MnDOT's not letting the project. And we had talked about changing that to a Scott County project number.
Okay, that's a little out of my memory since I was on vacation till this morning.
Yep.
Scott County.
Yep, so I have the project number that we assigned to it, and I can give that to you right now if you'd like.
Sure, and I don't know whether this needs to be part of the motion, but if it is, we'll just have it cleaned up for TAC and hopefully not have to go through that again.
Yep, it's 070-659-001.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, for that information. Any other discussion or comment? All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So Joe, you would like a motion on this, somewhat similar to what we're seeing on the screen here. So I'd ask if any members would want to make a motion.
This is Maddie Dahlheimer from Washington County. I can make a motion that the TAC Funding and Programming Committee recommend adoption of the amendment to the 2024-2027 TIP to add 2 regionally significant projects, including the Corridors of Commerce funded, I-94 lane expansion from Albertville to Monticello in Wright County, and the construction of US 169 interchange at CASA 59 in Scott County, including the updated project number, and that the amendment be released for public comment.
All right, thank you, Maddie. We got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second, Robert Ellis.
All right, thank you, Robert. Second by Robert. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote yay or nay via roll call. Bradley?
Jack Forslund in Anoka County.
Aye.
Darren Milkey, Carver County.
Aye.
Do we have anyone on the call now for Dakota County? Okay, hearing none. Jason Piper, Hennepin County.
Aye.
Scott Merrick, Ramsey County.
Aye.
Adam Jessen, Scott County.
Aye.
Maddie Dahlheimer, Washington County.
Aye.
Do we have Carl Keel on for Bloomington at this point? Okay, Robert Ellis, Eden Prairie.
Aye.
Brandon Brodag, Ridley.
Aye.
Paul Omi, Lakeville.
Aye.
You, Ken Ashbell, Maple Grove. Hey, Katie White, Minneapolis Engineering.
Aye.
Michael Thompson, Plymouth.
Aye.
Ann Weber, St. Paul Engineering.
Aye.
You, Scott Chinowiak, Metro Transit.
Aye.
Matt Fighton, Suburban Transit.
Aye.
Nancy Spooner Walsh, GNR. Mike Samuelson, MnDOT Bike and Ped.
Aye.
You, Aaron Tagg, MnDOT Metro District.
Aye.
Colleen Brown, MnDOT State Aid.
Aye.
Innocent AO, MPCA.
Aye.
Cole Henniker, Met Council MTS.
Aye.
And Elaine Kutsukos, TAP Coordinator.
Aye.
Everyone, chair motion passes.
Thank you, Bradley. Next on the agenda is the scope change request for Southwest Transit. I'll hand it back over to Joe.
Thank you, Chair. This is a scope change request for Southwest Transit Mobility Hub at Southwest Station. So Southwest Transit was awarded $3.6 million and change in CMAQ funds in the 2018 regional solicitation to fund transit mobility hub centered at Southwest Station. The project targeted expansion of on-demand service known as Southwest Prime, a bike rental program, and a car share service to connect users to fixed route travel. The applicant's proposing removal of, quote, procurement, operation, and maintenance of 5 car share vehicles to be operated out of Southwest Station in Eden Prairie, end quote, due to struggles that other car share endeavors have had in the region. Because of the increasing cost of Southwest Prime vehicles, Southwest Transit requests moving the funds to help cover the increased cost of Southwest Prime vehicles instead of car sharing vehicles. So table 1 here shows the usual scoring analysis to see whether or not the project as proposed now would have been funded, which of course is not always an easy decision to make, but given the minor change in how this would have likely impacted the scoring measures that we have, staff thinks that the project would have been funded either way. So we wouldn't recommend denying the scope change. And then of course we talk about the costs. In recent history, I've said this many times in recent months or years, shows that we tend to retain the federal award when elements are being removed and completed in another project. Now, a difference here is that this doesn't really seem to be completed elsewhere. We're just removing a piece of the project. It has been a while since we've really done that. But the precedent really would be that the money is oftentimes kept out of the project or not retained by the project. The cost of the removed elements, they show us $275,000. So 80% of that, i.e. the federal share, would be $220,000. That's really all I have now. We do have people representing the project here. People have questions for them, or if they wish to volunteer anything. Otherwise, I would stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Would the applicant like to speak to the request? I'm not hearing anybody. Joe, do you know who is on for the applicant?
We have a couple people from our finance, Nicole and Ashley, and I don't believe anybody from Southwest is here, and I apologize in that I, being out recently, did not give them a lot of notice to invite them to this meeting. But
okay, yeah, well, if they were here, I just want to make sure to give them a chance. Okay, any questions or comments for Joe?
Chair, this is Cole, Met Council.
Yeah.
One question, Joe. I know I should know this, but the transit category appears to have a bike ped connections scoring criteria, but not like a multimodal one. So the idea that you're providing what I would consider a travel demand management strategy probably wasn't captured in the original scoring process. And just a note for us maybe to think about a change there where it's not just about whether transit's providing bike ped connections. There can be other TDM oriented services that they could be providing that we should be factoring into our scoring of transit applications. Is that accurate?
so I believe you're referring to this row 5 here that I'm trying to highlight unsuccessfully. And you know what? I to be honest, I'd probably have to look before I really answer that in a big way, because we do have multimodal connections as part of every category. So I think you're right, but I will check because and that is something I think going into the regional solicitation evaluation we could look at if there's more than just bike ped connections for multimodal in transit categories. But I believe you're correct. I don't know if Steve or Elaine remembers offhand, but
I did not.
I can look quickly.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Mr. Chair, no concerns with this, just a note for us to think about moving forward. And I think the scope change doesn't materially change the project, so.
Okay, thanks, Cole, and thanks for pointing that out. Any other questions or comments or motion?
I would add a comment that being that the car share is similar to the rides that Prime is now providing, and that microtransit has increased, doing similar type of trips, that when we looked at this, for me, I felt comfortable that the rides are similar enough that we could move the funding over. And rather than having them do the car sharing, which isn't as, I mean, as time has changed, the microtransit has shifted to become the predominant, that would make sense to put the funding there rather than if we denied the change, that either the denying the change that making them put the cars in does not make sense.
Yeah,
that's one thing.
Yeah, and that's just one
here,
small.
And that's one thing, without them here, I don't know if this was denied the funding part, would they then decide to keep it and put the cars in? Or
Yeah, thank you, Elaine. And I think, you know, as a reminder, it's just one small portion of the overall application as well. But great point. You know, if they don't want it or don't need it, you know, they should put the money where they think it would be best used. And so here we're relying on the applicant to do the right thing with the money, and we'll see how the committee wants to proceed here. So if there's comfort moving forward with this, we'll need a motion and a second.
Sure, we have some comments in the chat from Ashley. Hang on.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Let's see here.
And Mr. Chair, Ashley is our one of the representatives from the finance team, actually within the Met Council that participates and helps some of the suburban providers through some of the contracting.
Okay, it is the scope of the budget similar to what is in the staff report, I assume. I think we have it unless there's something different, Ashley, but feel free to chime in if you want to add anything. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
just in case Ashley's having audio issues. Yeah, I think you have pretty much everything captured here in terms of the budget impact. And to Elaine's previous comment about would they keep the car share in if this were denied? I don't believe so. Conversations that we've had with Southwest, they've determined that it just isn't really a viable component of the project any longer due to changes in the car share kind of landscape over the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you for that. Cole, did you have something?
Yeah, you know, the reason I brought that question up was primarily because to point out that we didn't really evaluate this project on the inclusion of car share. It was sort of a bonus, you know, whereas in a roadway project, if you were taking out a bike lane, we would probably dock some points and see where it played out. But that's why I want to make that very clear. I think if this was a TDM element that was part of a multimodal element of the project, it would have gotten points for that. And I don't think that was factored into the scoring. If it was, we should maybe have a discussion about that, because it's not too dissimilar to taking out like a bike lane on a project, you know, an option for other modes. I don't look at it as being the same as the on-demand transit service. It's actually a way to provide people that might be using that service another mode or option. So that's the way I would look at it. And so I just don't think the transit applications were set up to score this kind of element. So I think it's kind of irrelevant based on how we scored it in the past. I don't want to maybe misrepresent that as a fact, though. That's what I believe went on. And so with that taken into account, I would say this is a fair request. But if it was scored as part of the project and they got points for it, we should have a different conversation.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. And looking at the points, they only received 45 out of 100 on that one.
All right, Cole,
Yeah. I pulled up the application measure and it reads, discuss any bicycle or pedestrian elements that are included as part of the total project and how they improve the travel experience, safety and security for users. And address how proposed project safely integrates all modes of transportation, transit vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians. So it is mainly bicycle pedestrian in the measure.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion, but I think Maddie Dahlhammer has her hand up. But once she's done, I'm happy to make a motion when we're ready.
Okay, Maddie?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, again, being somewhat new to this group. So our current policy, the way it is written, is essentially if we're cutting something out, and it's not being completed by another project, then the applicant would not keep those funds. We have precedent, which I have been a part of those votes, where like something is removed, but it's getting completed by like a city or another project, and we have said, sure, let them keep all of the money. If we make a motion and a vote on this one to keep the funds and not do it, it's somewhat precedent setting for, you know, maybe future requests. I just want to confirm that like we haven't done something like this before, and the kind of precedent we have of moving away policy, of doing something away from policy, has been slightly different. Not to say how we should or should not proceed, but certainly I think leads into our later information item of like, if the intent is still there that like they are expanding transit options and services to people, then we're going to say, yes, you can keep the money. If things are to change between, you know, the 5 years between applying and actually executing something. I don't know that that's really a question, but just want to confirm that like this is fairly unique in terms of setting precedent.
If I can respond to that, Chair.
Yes.
This isn't unique. We have done that in the past. Usually it's been a smaller amount. In the past, when we've discussed the last changes for the scope change policy, we discussed, do we want to put a dollar amount, 50,000, 1% of the project? And it came down to, no, let's evaluate each project individually. So usually it's been a smaller amount, under 50,000. You know, but it changes, you know, the scope of the project. So they have been looked at individually. So it has occurred in the past when it's small amounts, but off the top of my head, I cannot say how many of those and what those amounts all were. Part of it, I think it was with the project managers trying to reallocate smaller amounts of money, took more time and effort and staff time than it was to put that money on different projects, because that's how it was.
Yeah, thank you, Elaine.
200,000 is significant enough or low enough, or that would be something up to the committee to decide.
Chair, I'm sharing my screen, so I can't find how to raise my hand, so I'm doing it on camera.
Okay. Yeah.
So I put the applicable part of the policy up here, and I know it's probably people don't necessarily relish the idea of trying to read that while figuring out how they're going to vote or if they're going to make a motion. So there's nothing in here that necessarily says that what has to be done, and it kind of plays to Elaine's point of TAB suggesting that it be taken care of case by case, and we had floated out numbers of, you know, if it's under this, don't worry about it, if it's or whatever, and TAB seemed to not appreciate us not having a firm rationale for why we were picking a number, so it kind of died. But you'll see the way this is written, that staff may recommend funding reduction options, and to be perfectly blunt, I didn't really do that. I didn't really make a recommendation. I think I was kind of trapped in the recent cycle of not making that recommendation, and some of the other more trendy, if you will, requests where we are having the project done elsewhere. So anyway, this is what you're seeing, and it does, by design, allow for some flexibility. And referring to the info item coming later, that is something that there might be feedback that, hey, maybe we don't want that flexibility. I don't know, but unfortunately, this is where we are now. And speaking of precedent, because we are going to revisit this, I'm not too worried about precedent one way or the other, because we are going to examine some of the things that we're talking about and sort of kill precedents, for lack of a better term. But as you can see by what you see in front of you, there's not necessarily anything concrete that says what you have to do now per policy. I hope that ramble.
Yeah, thanks,
Joe.
Joe.
Confuse things too badly.
Thanks, Joe. I think I saw a thumbs up from Maddie. And Colleen Brown, do you have anything to add on this?
Nope, I think they've covered everything. It's basically, yeah, when we've had work done by another project or adjacent project, we've allowed them to keep the funds, and smaller amounts we haven't really taken away from project sponsors in the past. And like Joe said, it's been kind of a case by case. There's no set dollar amounts or no set line that they draw.
Okay, thank you, Colleen.
And this is just 5% is the calculation. That's what I just quickly did here. If someone wants to check my math.
Elaine, calculation for what?
For the percent, it was that if it was 200,000 out of the 3.6 million.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, so it's a smaller percent, small amount. So, this could go either way. I guess it's just up to the committee here to discuss, and we have reviewed these on a case by case. Typically, elements get done by another project, and sponsors keep their money if they can spend it and still meet the match. So this is a little unique. We've had these come up before that have moved through, but certainly something that we should put some thought into here. And I think we have. So
yeah, Mr. Chair, I can move approval of the scope change. Just noting that I think it would be good for you to summarize the discussion at TAC, and maybe if staff could have some of those questions about, or maybe we need to add it to the item about this was not part of this evaluation of the score. It's considered like a bonus element of the project, because I think that's relevant. When you're talking about proportionate reduction of project benefit, I don't think this factored into the project benefit really at all when the score was evaluated for this project. So to me, that says, they're taking away something, but it wasn't part of how we scored this project. So for that sense, I would make a motion to approve the scope change.
all right, thank you, Cole. So we have a motion to approve the scope change, and then of course with adding some of the summary discussion from today to the TAC. Do we have a second?
Can I clarify, is it the motion with no reduction of funding?
Correct.
I'll second.
Yes.
I'll second that motion. Elaine,
all right, thank you, Elaine. Elaine seconds. Any further discussion? If so, just please speak up. I can't see hands raised here.
Chair, this is Jason from Hennepin.
Yes, Jason.
Just more an observation than anything. I know with the regional solicitation, a theme category or component of projects is innovation. And I think we're going to continue to be urged as applicants to explore innovative ideas. And I think we're going to find through project development some things just don't make sense as you look into it further. So definitely think we want to keep an open mind moving forward as we try to push that envelope and not just be, spending federal dollars because that's what our application said we needed to do. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Jason. Any other further discussion? Please speak up. All right, hearing none, we'll vote by roll call. Bradley?
Jack Forestland, Anoka County.
Aye.
Darren Milkey, Carver County.
Aye.
Jason Piper, Hennepin County.
Aye.
Scott Merrick, Ramsey County.
Aye.
Adam Jessen, Scott County.
Aye.
Thank you. Maddie Dahlheimer, Washington County.
Aye.
Robert Ellis, Eden Prairie.
Aye.
Brandon Brodegg, Fridley.
Aye.
Paula Omi, Lakeville.
Aye.
Katie White, Minneapolis Engineering.
Aye.
Michael Thompson, Plymouth.
Aye.
Ann Weber, St. Paul Engineering.
Aye.
Scott Janowiak, Metro Transit.
Aye.
Matt Fighton, Suburban Transit.
Aye.
Mike Samuelson, MnDOT Bike and Ped.
Aye.
Aaron Tagg, MnDOT Metro District.
Aye.
Colleen Brown, MnDOT State Aid.
Aye.
Innocent Ao, MPCA. Sorry, Innocent, couldn't hear you. Cole Henniker, Met Council MTS.
Aye.
And Elaine Kutsukos, Staff Coordinator.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Chair, motion passes.
All right, thank you, Bradley. The next item is the associated tip amendment related to the Southwest Transit scope change.
Thank you, Chair. This is a tip amendment to include the project you just discussed in the tip. And really, we've had a couple of these recently. It's a project that that was in the tip and sort of fell out of the tip through administrative miscues. And so we have to make sure that this project is back in the tip in the 2024 through 2027 tip because it's not, and it should have been. So apologies for sort of the strangeness that led us to where we're at. But it's really just putting the project in that they were awarded funding for that you just discussed. And that's really it. The amounts here would have changed had you changed anything in the last recommendation, but they don't. Of course, if any changes are made at one of the next committees, that would then reflect changes here. But there's really not much else to say except let's put this in the tip. That I'd stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Joe. Questions for Joe or a motion?
This is Maddie Dahlheimer, Washington County. Joe, does this need to go to public comment period, the same as the first one?
Chair and Maddie, no, it does not. This is not a regionally significant project. And so this is just an item that goes through the regular process. It'll go to tab. In fact, this didn't even necessarily need to come to this meeting. It's just because it's associated with the previous item, we did bring it to this meeting.
Okay. Well, I can make a motion to recommend approval of the Southwest Transit request to add the mobility hub project at Southwest Station to the 2024-2027 tip.
All right, we have a motion by Maddie. Do we have a second?
Elaine Kutsukos, second.
Second. Oh.
All right, we're going to give that to Colleen Brown because she doesn't second many motions. So Colleen seconds. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll vote by roll call. Bradley?
Okay, Jack Forslund, Anoka County.
Aye.
Aaron Wilkie, Carver County.
Aye.
Jason Piper, Hennepin County.
Aye.
Scott Merrick, Ramsey County.
Aye.
Adam Jessen, Scott County. Sorry, Adam, I didn't hear you on that one. Right, Maddie Dahlheimer, Washington County.
Aye.
Robert Ellis, Eden Prairie.
Aye.
Brandon Brodag, Fridley.
Aye.
Paul Omi, Lakeville.
Aye.
Katie White, Minneapolis Engineering.
Aye.
Michael Thompson, Plymouth.
Aye.
And Weber, St. Paul Engineering.
Aye.
Scott Shinowiak, Metro Transit.
Aye.
Matt Fighton, Suburban Transit.
Aye.
Mike Samuelson, MnDOT Bike and Ped.
Aye.
Aaron Tagg, MnDOT Metro District.
Aye.
Colleen Brown, MnDOT State Aid.
Aye.
Innocent AO, MPCA. Met Council, MTS, Cole Henniker.
Aye.
And Elaine Kutsukos, TAC Coordinator.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Chair, motion passes.
Thank you, Bradley. And lastly, on our general business items, we have program year extension request through the city of Blaine. My understanding, Steve, are you on to present this?
I am. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. Last action item, and then we have two info items to round out the meeting here today. So this is a request from the city of Blaine, similar in nature to the what you saw over the last few months. We had one for 252. You may remember that one, and then another one that the city of Brooklyn Park had related to Blue Line extension. And those are perhaps more complex situations than this one, but the same general nature. We have a project through the regional solicitation that is wanting to move more than 1 year out to align with a larger project. So that's maybe the common thread here. We did bring the city of Blaine's request to TAB executive, and they told us to send that through the process as opposed to wait for this scope change program year policy work group that will be starting up in October, in part because the money's in 2024 here. So wanted to not hold this request up until the work group concludes its work and any number of months from now. So what happened on the request on this one here, the city of Blaine applied in the regional solicitation, was awarded $10 million in program year 2024 to convert a at-grade signal to an interchange, and we're making progress towards doing that. And since that award was made, the combination of the city of Blaine, Anoka County, and MnDOT compiled a small mountain of money from other sources, and it's detailed in the action item. Everything from Corps of Commerce to TED, another regional solicitation grant, state legislative funding, RAISE federal grant, and a few other sources too. So, and that was for a larger project. So all said and done, they'd like to do 4 interchange projects along Highway 65 at one time, as opposed to doing each individual one. And that's really the benefit of this request, is that MnDOT is now going to take over the project because it is a Corps of Commerce project from either the city of Blaine or Anoka County, and do all 4 interchanges in one time. So that'll be about a 3-year construction period, as opposed to doing a 6 to 8 year construction period by doing them one at a time. So you never know when you start these corridor projects if you're going to be able to compile the amount of money needed to do a bigger project. But in this case, the stars aligned with new IIJA and new state money coming in at the right time, really, for this project area. So we did do a pros and cons list similar to what we did for 252 and the Brooklyn Park project. And again, the major pros of you approving this would be to combine the projects, minimize it's really the construction duration and impacts for both kind of local businesses, local residents, and users of the corridor, and certainly some contracting benefits from doing this all at once versus four separate projects over the better part of a decade. So the con, again, this is the policy does say you get a one-time 1 year project extension to the program year policy, but as we've seen a few times here, doesn't always work with some of these larger projects when they get compiled and how they can be delivered. So I know we do have MnDOT reps that are involved with the project. Aaron Kaag is here, and certainly Anoka County has a rep on this committee, Jerry Ogier, that's been involved in the project. And I did invite Blaine City Engineer Dan Schlender too, if you do have questions or if they want to add anything before I turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks. Do MnDOT or Anoka County, anybody want to weigh in on this?
Maybe they can be on hand for questions as they arise.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, any questions for Steve on this item?
Chair, this is Jason from Hennepin.
Yeah, go for it, Jason.
Just looking at the multiple awards for this project, I saw some regional solicitation funds, the corridors of commerce, the TED. Can you just walk me through how those funding sources are being aligned like right now? So TED, are those funds able to be slid to 2026 as well? And then kind of a follow-up question. For Hennepin County, we had a similar situation with Trunk Highway 252. And in the last couple of years, the locally pursued federal awards were attached to the HIP, to the corridors of commerce, and it kind of became one project. Mm-hmm. Has that happened here with this Trunk Highway 65, or is that likely going to happen down the road? Thank you.
Steve, this is Dan Schlender. Maybe I can try to answer that question if that's all right.
Yes. Yep. Go ahead.
We are in the process of trying to align all these funding sources. I think we have a total of 12 different funding sources on this project, which we're excited about. It is fully funded if some of these funds can slide to meet all of them, the rest of them. So as you mentioned, like TED, there is a request in to have that one moved as well. And I think there was one other, and then the rest of them should all align for a 26 construction. So we do have a little work ahead of us, but a bulk of the funding is all set already, and it's just a few of these pieces that we're trying to get aligned so that the project continues to stay fully funded.
All right, thank you, Dan. And I assume once they get aligned, then they all get combined into one project number. I mean, that's the goal here, right? Is that the crux of your question, Jason?
Yeah, and just the potential for local agencies to reapply in future cycles. I know that was kind of viewed as a huge con for us, that if we were not successful in getting the program year extension for Trunk Highway 252, we really couldn't reapply to the regional solicitation based on how we'll call it the new project was established.
Right.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. This is Michael Corbett from MnDOT. I just a couple hours ago, I just received a interchange planning review request from Anoka County for Bunker Lake Boulevard. Is the vision to try and include this improvement along with the corridors of commerce thing, or would this be pursued at a separate time?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that might be a good question. Jerry Ogier, are you on the line?
Nope,
Pass
not
that to
Jerry,
Anoka
but
County.
I am.
Oh,
Yeah, I
Jack.
got it from you,
This is
Jack.
It's Jack. Yep, I was Michael. I was the one that sent you that request. That is true. I don't think that that would probably fall within that same timeline of it. I mean, that'd be $28. So I wouldn't
no
plan
problem.
on that. But if it
All right, appreciate
does
the
happen, it'd be
clarification.
nice. Okay.
All right, I think Michael's question was answered. So is my understanding that there's a new interchange we're talking about that won't be looped into this overall project? Is that correct, Jack?
Yeah. Well, the next interchange after Main Street, 125th Avenue and Blaine, which is kind of like the terminus of the earlier work, I guess, or this project through 117th. So the next one major intersection would be at Bunker. That's probably a little over a mile, I guess, from Main Street. And so we're trying to get that whole corridor actually up to freeway standards. So we will be submitting an application for that. But I don't think that would be, I don't think that will be part of this construction project.
All right. Well, you never know. We got some time.
That would be nice. Hopefully it does, but we're not planning on it right now, I don't think.
Okay. Thank you for that information. All right. Any other discussion? All right. We'll need a motion and a second on this item.
Mr. Chair, this is Paul Lakeville. I move approval of this item.
All right. Thank you, Paul. We got a motion. Do we have a second?
Maddie Dahlheimer, Washington County, second.
All right. Thank you, Maddie. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote via roll call. Bradley?
Thank you, Chair. Anoka County, Jack Forslund.
Aye.
You. Jared Milkey, Carver County.
Aye.
Jason Piper, Hennepin County.
Aye.
Scott Merrick, Ramsey County.
Aye.
Adam Jessen, Scott County.
Aye.
Patty Dahlheimer, Washington County.
Aye.
Robert Ellis, Eden Prairie.
Aye.
Brandon Brodegg, Fridley.
Aye.
Paul Omi, Lakeville.
Aye.
Katie White, Minneapolis Engineering.
Aye.
Michael Thompson, Plymouth.
Aye.
Ann Weber, St. Paul Engineering.
Aye.
Scott Shinowiak, Metro Transit.
Aye.
Matt Fighton, Suburban Transit.
Aye.
Mike Samuelson, MnDOT Bike and Ped.
Aye.
Aaron Tagg, MnDOT Metro District.
Aye.
Colleen Brown, MnDOT State Aid.
Aye.
Innocent AO, are you still on? MPCA? Okay. Cole Henniker at Council MTS.
Aye.
And Elaine Kutsuko, Staff Coordinator.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Chair, motion passes.
All right, thank you, Bradley. That concludes all of our general business today. And as Steve mentioned, we do have 3 informational items. So first being Regional Solicitation Survey Kickoff. And I'll turn it over to Steve and Bethany.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Bradley. I'll just have you run the slides since you have them up. So last cycle for regional solicitation, we did a public input survey. We are going to repeat that again. This year, though, we did hire Zan Consulting, or Zan Associates, sorry, and they will be leading us through the engagement work. So I'm going to turn it over to Danny. She's
Hello.
on. There she is.
Hi.
And I'll let her walk us through.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, committee chair and committee members, and thank you, Bethany. Again, my name is Danny Hans. I'm from the consulting group Zan Associates. And like Bethany said, today I'll discuss an overview of the regional solicitation survey process and the timeline, as well as the main sections of the survey. And I will also discuss some engagement principles and tactics as well. So here we have a very basic overview of the survey process. First, we'll plan the timeline and the approach. Then we'll draft the survey content, determine the appropriate survey tool, and determine the layout and format of the survey questions. Then we will launch the survey and promote it through a variety of methods, which we'll discuss a little bit later. And of course, at the end, we'll analyze and present the results. So this is a look at how the timing of the survey compares to the regional solicitation process overall. The regional solicitation process is in dark blue. The survey timeline is in light blue. So right now we're coming up on the application period. That's September to November. We've got committee presentations about the survey planned. Obviously today we have one at TAC on October 4th and another presentation to TAB on October 18th. We are currently drafting the survey and we'll open it up and start promoting it next month in October. And then that survey will remain open until January, when the list of eligible applications is posted to the website. And I want to make this kind of change really clear. This is a key change from the timeline last year. So this year's survey will close before the applications are posted to the website. And the goal here is to just reduce any chance of bias in the survey responses. Then while the applications are being scored between January and March of next year, we'll be analyzing the survey results. And then we'll come back to this committee, as well as TAC and TAB, to present results in the spring at the start of the project selection process, which is March through July. All right, and next I'll discuss the outline of the 2023 survey. So we've got 6 overarching sections of the survey here. The first one is an introduction to the survey. Then we've got a question about affiliation of the respondent. Then we have the budget exercise, then a priority exercise, then some basic demographic questions, and a closing of the survey. So section 1, the introduction portion of the survey, is really important here to set the stage for respondents. So what are we doing? Why do we need their input? What will we do with that input? We want to make sure respondents know that their answers will inform the TAB as it considers project selection. This really helps them then make informed opinions, have accurate expectations as they fill out the survey. And it also, helps make this government process more transparent. All right, and then in section 2 of the survey, we'll ask respondents if they represent any of the listed groups. This is a summary of the same groups as were asked about last year, with the addition of corridor coalitions, which was a group that was identified as important to note from last year's results. And this will really help us understand the priorities for members of these different groups when we analyze those results. So section 3 of the survey is the budget exercise. This is like the main event of the survey. It will give respondents an amount of funding to spend and then ask them to designate their dollar amounts to the application categories that they want to be prioritized. And the elements of this exercise are, of course, the application category titles, as well as descriptions for each application category, so people really know and understand what they're choosing. That'll include examples as well. We'll also have the average request amounts from last year, just to provide that additional context, making sure that people are really, making informed decisions. And then, of course, space to put their dollar amounts for their category allocations. All right. And then the fourth section of the survey is a prioritization exercise regarding the 3 modal areas. So those are the overarching application or overarching areas with the application categories kind of underneath. So these overarching modal areas, of course, are roadways, transit and travel demand management, and bicycle and pedestrian facilities. This exercise asks respondents to prioritize application categories within each of these 3 modal areas. And these questions are asked to gather prioritization data from people who might not have otherwise selected any application categories from a particular modal area in the previous budget exercise. So for example, if in the previous budgeting exercise, the respondent only allocated money to application categories in one modal area, like roadway projects, for example, this prioritization question helps us understand, well, what would they prioritize within the other modal areas, like pedestrian projects, for example. So this is really meant to help us get a fuller picture of respondent priorities so that we can inform funding decisions for each modal area. All right. And then next we've got in section 5 of the survey, demographic questions. These are the same identity dimensions from last year's survey: zip code, race and ethnicity, age, gender, disability, and income. These questions will help us understand whether there are trends that are different or trends that are aligned between different segments of respondents. And we'll also talk more about equitable engagement in just a moment. All right. And the last section of the survey is kind of the closing, the wrap up. So like last year, we'll provide an email sign up, and this really helps us stay in touch and close that feedback loop. And what I mean by that is, instead of asking for people's input and then never following up, we want to make sure we have a way to follow up with respondents about what were the outcomes of this process. We also want to thank respondents to take the time to fill out the survey and really reiterate the value of their response to us. And then we want to talk about next steps. That really shows transparency and accountability. Talking about next key dates in the process, when the committee meetings are. This way folks can really follow along in the process and see how the results of the survey were considered during the selection process. So yeah, overall, just closing that feedback loop and bringing folks along for the ride is just a great way to build trust. All right. Now there are a few equitable engagement considerations we want to make sure are incorporated from the beginning of this process. And there we go. First off, I just want to recognize that the equitable engagement was lacking last year. The respondent demographics of last year's survey were heavily white and wealthy. So this year, there will be a specific focus on equity engagement that will hopefully ensure broader demographic participation, both from the different identity dimensions that we had listed before, like race and ethnicity and income, as well as from across the region. So from many different counties, really getting at that geographic diversity as well. And I think it's also important here to note what engagement is and isn't capable of. So doing equitable engagement doesn't automatically guarantee a large increase in the number of responses, and it doesn't, it can't really act as a ballot referendum or as a census, but it does allow us to reach specific groups that might not otherwise participate and see whether trends are different or aligned between the different segments of respondents. And we also understand that just because we talked with some members of a community, it doesn't necessarily mean we can assume that the whole community feels the same way. So I want to acknowledge that. With that said, a few equitable engagement tactics could include things like in-language intercept surveys. So that's basically meeting people where they are at in the community, places they already go to, and surveying them in their primary language. So this could be at culturally specific shopping centers, public transportation hubs, food shelves, etc. Another tactic is place-based promotions. This could be yard signs, sidewalk decals, ways to catch people where they're at in a passive way, and also in multiple languages. And these would be placed in strategic high-activity locations throughout the metro. Another tactic is coordination with existing community-based organizations who are already really embedded in these communities, and really using the methods that they tell us work best for their networks. So that could include flyers, email blasts, listening sessions, or tabling at community events, for example. And of course, government agencies are encouraged to help spread word about the survey as well. So equitable engagement, I want to make sure to say it doesn't only include outreach tactics, but it also has a lot of meaning for accessibility of the survey itself. And by that, I mean making the language of the survey plain enough for a broad audience to understand. Plain language is really key to helping people make informed decisions. Because if respondents don't understand a term or a concept, or if they can't easily skim the information that we're presenting to them in this survey, they may ignore certain answer options they might otherwise choose, or they might be overwhelmed, feel out of place, exit out of the survey altogether. And this can lead to skewed results. So, one example of plain language, travel demand management. It's pretty obvious to us, but we're in this industry. It might not be as obvious to other folks. So there's, other ways that we can relay that same meaning without using a jargony term. It could be alternative transportation or something similar. So essentially using more accessible plain language than the 2022 survey might mean that we slightly change how things are worded, but the intent and the meaning will of course stay the same. Another note about plain language, it matters a lot for accurate translations of materials into other languages. Basically, jargon doesn't translate easily. So overall, we just want to make sure we're starting to plan now for equitable engagement at the beginning of this process, and that will give us really the best chance at connecting with broader audiences for this year's survey. All right. So in summary, we've reviewed the survey process, the sections of the survey, and some engagement tactics and principles. I want to open it up for any questions, and you've got our contact here as well in case anyone wants to follow up later too. Before I open it up, I do want to make sure to ask a question that I know we'd like to get some input from you all on about the Active Transportation Fund. So as we understand it, the TAB in their discretion may elect to use some portion of the Active Transportation Funds in this solicitation process. So our question is, should we use this engagement effort to collect public priorities on the funding from the Active Transportation Funds? So I'll open it up to questions, or if folks want to start answering that question I just posed as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Danny. Bethany, anything else to add before we open it up for questions?
Nothing from me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, questions or any comments on the active transportation item? Katie?
I think it's a good idea to fold that in at this point. I think that given the timeline given to us by the legislature, it might not work out well to do a similar level of engagement at a different time. And so it makes sense to be efficient in our use of resources and ask those questions now. I do worry a little bit because it is it's a little bit different than what you just outlined for the rest of the work, you know, because it has been prioritized for us, right? We're not asking about prioritizing active transportation. The legislature did it for us. So I worry a little bit about how this group and, you know, the full TAC want to be engaged on the use of those resources from the technical perspective, but I do think there's value in MTS proceeding now with some engagement on it for the public's perspective.
Thank you, Katie. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Chair, this is Jason.
Yeah, Jason.
Just continue to think about how the regional solicitation has historically been framed for federal funds and awarding those to local agencies, whereas these new active transportation program funds, to my knowledge, are not federal funds. And so it's a totally different playing field as far as project eligibility. And so just want to exercise caution when the two are mixed, since when it comes to design, construction, and actually receiving the funds, they follow very different processes.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Bethany, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair and member. I don't think our intent would be to collect a lot of in-depth feedback, but specifically for designing the projects and things like that, but mostly to help TAB think about whether they want to use these funds if the projects that they see come in exceed the federal funds that we have. They did talk about safe routes to school in that last TAB meeting that we discussed active transportation. So it wouldn't necessarily be project specific, but more programmatic feedback for that set of funds.
All right, thank you, Bethany. And regarding active transportation, and maybe this is a question for Dan, this is just for the upcoming solicitation because we have the larger work group to figure out how to address the ongoing legislative or the appropriation from the Metro sales tax for active transportation. And I know there's a lot of discussion that needs to go into that because I know just through the formula funds through that, I know the counties are receiving tens of millions of dollars, and you know, who should be eligible to even apply for active transportation. So I know there will be a much bigger discussion on that, but the question from my understanding is specific just to the upcoming solicitation. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have any other comments or questions or anybody wanting to weigh into the active transportation feedback? All right, I'm not seeing any more hands raised. All right, Bethany, anything else that we should touch on this item here before we move on?
Nope, that is everything that we wanted to share with the committee today. So thank you all.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. All right, next we're going to move on to the intersection mobility and safety study. So we have Steve Peterson and Michael Corbett.
All right, well, thanks everyone. Paul, Morris, I'm not sure if you're able to share your screen or if you need me to do that for the presentation, but or Steve. Perfect. Okay. We'll just get to our opening slide there. So I'm Michael Corbett. I'm the MnDOT project manager, kind of the co-project manager, along with Steve Peterson from the Met Council. So we're just going to give you an update on the intersection mobility and safety study, where we're getting kind of on the final stretches here of this project. Go ahead and do the next slide, please. So I'll give you a little bit of background of kind of how this differs from the previous study we did. Talk about some before and after results of a few projects done in the last 5 to 10 years that have done some grade separated interchanges and how that's affected various criteria. We'll talk about how we considered equity in our evaluation of kind of our scoring and tiering, and we'll get into those actual results briefly, and then discuss kind of the next steps and sort of how to integrate this into the transportation policy plan, and to help our local partners to identify kind of where where maybe their local priorities sort of might fit in the bigger picture at a more metro district level. Next slide, please. So you might recall 6 years ago now, we did the principal arterial intersection conversion study. This is essentially version 2.0, but it's a little bit different in that it's not explicitly focused on grade separated interchange conversions. We realize that may be the best solution for a lot of locations, but other locations there could be some lower cost, higher benefit types of treatments that might help to alleviate a significant amount of the problem issues, whether it's crashes or delay or things like that. Obviously, we want to kind of get an idea. We're shying away from like a ranked list of like, this is number 1, this is number 12, this is 54. We kind of have the high, medium, and low tiers. So this is very similar to what we had in the last effort before. We want to use this information to help with a lot of our project managers when they're doing project scoping, and obviously we want to help our local partners and help identify regional priorities for the 2050 TPP regional solicitation, and certainly would be inputs to any other competitive grant process. Next slide, please. So we have about 520 study locations in all throughout the metro. Now, just to clarify, this is our non-freeway principal arterial system. So this is, you don't see 694 or 494 in there because those are limited access freeways. We have a variety of facilities where it might be more of an urban arterial with a lot of signals. It might be a little bit more of a suburban or almost a freeway. And there's kind of different gradations amongst that. But we looked at a lot of those and kind of came up with our various scoring criteria, which Paul or Nick will get into in a minute, and kind of figured out, okay, based on our overall problem magnitude, what's kind of falling into the high, medium, and low tiers. And with that, I think we can go to the next slide, and I believe either Paul or Nick will be kind of talking about the before and after results of a few projects done over the last couple of years. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Morris with SRF Consulting Group. We appreciate the opportunity to share the project information here today. So one of the first key elements of the study here was to do some before and after on recent projects that had been completed, primarily with grade separations here. Overall, we looked at 4 locations. 2 of those, we did an in-depth analysis that included quantitative review of traffic safety and mobility performance. And then there were some that were more of a qualitative look only in order to look at some of the kind of surrounding context as a result of those projects with land use, multimodal, equity implications, and so forth. So share a few highlights from those assessments here. Starting with the equity side, here you can see the buckets that were considered. You know, admittedly, this was a qualitative assessment, a lot of times reviewing the environmental documentation that was prepared for those projects. We scoured a lot of the engagement materials in terms of how the community was engaged, how many participated, and to the extent possible, you know, some of the demographic characteristics of that engagement and how it reflected the surrounding communities. In addition, you know, looking at some of the kind of equity considerations of the surrounding land use. And we found mixed results. I think, you know, given that some of these projects occurred nearly a decade ago, there wasn't nearly the focus on equity and equitable engagement that we see today. However, generally speaking, we observed that the outcomes of the project were beneficial to the surrounding communities. And as you can see with some of the key takeaways at the bottom, all of those projects did improve multimodal connectivity and some other local enhancements. You can see things like crosswalks, refuge islands, ped signals, bike paths, and lighting. We would also note that those projects were consistent with comprehensive and transportation plans for the communities where they were located. So overall, really quite positive results from that assessment. As sort of a side activity as part of that work, we also developed a series of evaluation criteria primarily for this type of grade separation project on a principal arterial roadway. However, we believe a lot of these this assessment framework would really be applicable to a lot of types of highway project implementation here. And so you can see that's kind of divided into two elements: benefits in terms of who gains from that and ensuring that that is distributed equitably among the surrounding populations and users of that improvement, as well as the burdens to ensure that those aren't being unfairly borne, again, by primarily the neighbors adjacent to the project location. There is a separate technical memo that was prepared that describes this framework and how to apply it in more detail if anyone's interested. And just as a final example of that before and after analysis, Highway 169 and 41 near Shakopee was just completed at the time this work was being done. And so we did have a little bit of after data to be able to compare. And I think the results were nothing short of astounding here when you look at the magnitude of those annual benefits, both in terms of travel time savings and especially the crash savings. Really remarkable. And I would want to emphasize that it really met or even exceeded some of the projections in the development of this study. I think sometimes those can be criticized for being overly optimistic, but in this case, the project really delivered. Okay, so moving on to the update of the scoring and tiering for principal arterial intersections, I'll give just a very high level overview. Certainly there's significantly more detail in terms of the calculations that were performed and the data sources, but we'll just touch on the highlights here today. And our documentation is very close to being completed, and we look forward to distributing that here in the months to come. There were ultimately 7 performance measures that were used to evaluate and rank all of those intersection locations. 4 of them were in the mobility category. And we should point out that mobility was all measured at person hours. And so that is consistent. So we're not looking at vehicles. And that also allows us to include an apples to apples comparison of transit delay, which was really a novel measure. We were fortunate to be able to work with Metro Transit, who also develops this data for the Plymouth and Maple Grove and Southwest services, as well as MVTA provided some data to allow us to compute the delay on their system as well. And so really felt this was important to be able to put transit delay really on the same footing as drivers and riders in private vehicles. We also had 2 safety measures. with an emphasis on the more severe crashes. And so you can see the severe crash rate focusing just on the fatal and serious injury crashes, which is really the direction we understand that both MnDOT and FHWA, is, among other agencies, are focusing on. And finally, we did include a multimodal and equity measure by using MnDOT's SPACE tool, which is really an aggregate measure in and of itself that factors in several elements of demand for multimodal transportation based on several factors related to land use, demographics, and the transportation network. So with all of these taken into account, we were able to develop scores for each of the locations and then subsequently group those into tiers. What we want to just highlight here first are some of those high scoring locations. And so all of these points on the map show intersections that were grouped into that high tier needs. You can see overall there were 82 here. There were in fact a few more than that. So you may see 90 show up on a few maps. However, several of those locations already have program projects that are moving forward. In addition, we're showing those highest scoring, those top 20 locations here, if you're interested to know the relative rankings of those. As far as the overall system, you can see the distribution of the high, medium, and low tiered locations. And we really emphasize that these are really needs. And so when you go back to the 7 performance measures that I showed just a couple slides ago, this is really showing kind of where are those needs, both in terms of deficiencies and the sort of demand for improved safety and mobility at these intersections. One of the things that you might notice about this is that a lot of those high need locations are clustered along individual corridors, and there tend to be several of those orange and sometimes mixed in with some of the yellow dots right next to each other. Also, you can see some of those funded and under construction corridors are flagged there with 169 in Elk River, 169 in Anoka and Ramsey, and Highway 65 in Blaine. So those are the 8 that make the difference between the 90 and the 82 on the slides here. As I noted, you can see that a lot of these locations are on corridors, and so we've grouped those into kind of these sections that have consistently high need intersections along them. And so several, certainly many locations across the region with 2 or more, many times up to 4, 5, 6, up to 8 intersections really in a stretch. I think one of the other things I would call attention to here is that while many of the corridors are on state trunk highways, several of them are also on county-owned facilities. And so you'll see CASA 42 in Dakota and Scott counties called out, as well as Cedar Avenue, which of course is a county highway in Dakota County. I shouldn't leave out Shepherd Road in St. Paul as well. Maybe just one final note. We did, as you saw, there were, depending on how you count, between 82 and 90 high need locations. This was, considered kind of a remarkable finding of the study. I think there was a conventional wisdom that a priority list like this should have somewhere on the order of 40, maybe up to 50 locations on it. However, there was some logic to how that breakpoint between the high and medium tiers was assigned. And really what we were going off was some planning level information of where would the level of need suggest that a level of investment akin to a grade separation be warranted. Now, that doesn't mean that a grade separation is the correct solution. And indeed, we spent a lot of time speaking with the communities where these are located, and they expressed that grade separation was not the solution. But at the same time, I think it's remarkable to say that, no, it's not, 40 or 50 locations that have that level of need. It's probably really closer to 80 or 90 across the region. All right. The final element we'll talk about here was once those needs had been tabulated and separated into tiers, the regional priorities were developed. And this will be key to how this will be applied in the update to the transportation policy plan that Steve will speak about here in just a minute. So some of the key factors that go into identifying those regional priorities is where do those problem magnitudes or the needs that were observed at those locations align with the local vision. And so we're kind of looking for that trifecta of it being a high regional priority or high needs as measured here, that it was a local priority, that when we met with the cities and counties where those are located, they said that it was a high priority, and also that there is some planning work complete that provides some evidence and some planning and hopefully some public engagement that supports that solution actually is right, given more detailed information on the ground. Certainly more information than we can obtain just through kind of a regional planning type study. There were several other elements that were considered here. We did look at the performance across the scoring criteria. Certainly there were some that would suggest higher needs than others, and also look at that kind of project scope and type to ensure that aligned with the observed problems. And so with those regional priorities that were developed, which I think is somewhere on the order of about half of the high need locations, we are developing these kind of brochures or one-pagers that can be used to help share and really communicate what are the needs at that locations. And so while it might seem like a lot of this data that went into the scoring and tiering really just kind of exists behind the scenes, really we wanted to daylight that and really be able to communicate that to everyone here in terms of what did we observe and what are those needs that really drove identifying those locations as some of the top priorities throughout the region. And so as we get closer to completing the documentation, you will see somewhere around 30 or so of these kind of flyers that help to articulate what's going on and what the needs are, as well as kind of what the solutions identified are for some of these priority locations. All right, and Steve, do you want to take over at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Good job, and Michael before him. Next slide. So a few of the conclusions, and Paul touched on a few of these here, but we have upwards of 90 locations with high priority needs. Another 115 or so would fall into that medium priority bucket, which still showed a large level of need, as evidenced by kind of a $5 to $20 million cost budget would be cost effective for those projects, but mostly those would be at grade solutions. We talked about the difference between a lot of these are corridor level thinking that needs to take place, but in a few cases there are some isolated intersections. You know, one of them that comes to mind is Highway 36 and Highway 120 right on Washington and Ramsey County border. It's kind of the last signal sitting out there, and that's over time going to have more and more safety issues being kind of the first signal in both directions or that you come to. The before and after study did show a high level of effectiveness of the projects that we looked at for improving both safety and mobility, and talked a little bit about the equity framework. So next slide, please. So most important to this group is kind of how does this study translate into the TPP and into the regional solicitation from a funding perspective. So we're proposing to put all of the high need locations, the 85 or so, into the current revenue scenario of the TPP as opportunity areas. So as projects, so no solution will be identified, but as projects, mostly preservation projects occur on those areas, those would be opportunity areas to look at those specific intersections. The few exceptions out of that list of 85 would be the ones shown on this page, which had the three stools of high regional priority, a high local priority, and that planning work that suggests a grade separation. So those are the Highway 13 project, 65, 36, and 120 I just mentioned, and then last one being Highway 5. and Eden Prairie Road. Yeah, so the 65 segment would be the first Pell that was done. So that would be the remaining section from roughly County Road 10 northward. Be that Highway 65 section. South of there, the Pell, and I know Kitty was involved, proposed more at-grade solutions and or road diets in some of those areas, may be the likely outcome of some of those locations. So next slide. We did note the important role of this of the solicitation in partially funding projects, and you can see the solicitation is usually the first dollars in, but it's accounting for kind of a smaller and smaller percentage of the total funding pool. It used to be around a third of the those projects are paid for with the federal funds through the solicitation. Now it's trending more towards about a quarter or less. And you know, when we had the action item earlier in this meeting, I think Dan Schlender had mentioned, what do you say, maybe 12 different funding sources were going into that 65 project. And so what we heard from our local partners was it's getting more and more complicated to bring all of these funding sources together, and the timelines and the restrictions of funding for these different pots of funding programs. So it's really, really difficult on our local partners to deliver these projects. Is one thing we heard. Back on the Prince Bartiro intersection conversion study, a lot of our local partners did use the findings of that regional prioritization and use that in their federal grant applications for discretionary funding, either at the state level or the federal level. One example already of that's being used currently is MnDOT is applying for a Reconnecting Communities grant on Highway 55 from downtown all the way west to the west side of Plymouth. And they're going to use the results of this study to say, you know, from a corridor level, this has a tremendous amount of high priority needs on a regional scale. And it's a regional priority to take a further look at this. And maybe the solution isn't the same across Highway 55 from kind of east to west, but it is a regional priority, and that's going to come through on that funding application. So that's I think a great use of MnDOT Council prioritization effort. Next slide. So again, the solicitation is a big does play a big role. Usually the first dollars in, that's becoming a smaller and smaller share of the total project cost, which at least for the interchanges is hitting about $40 million or more for an interchange. Next slide. So one of the recommendations coming out of the study, and this is for the committees to consider moving forward, is that kind of the right amount, you know, putting $10 million on a $40 million project, and there's pluses and minuses of doing more or less. But what we did hear from our partners is that funding a higher percent of that project would make it simpler for implementation of these larger projects. And that is not just the strategic capacity, but a lot of these corridors are going to end up being roadway reconstruction projects. Maximum award is $7 million right now. The locals are putting in a higher and higher share of those projects. And also on the spot mobility, we heard too, the maximum is $3.5 million there. But as we start looking at the corridors and maybe doing more than one intersection, at-grade intersection at a time, through some of our visioning and corridor study work that's being done, some consideration of should that be a little bit higher than $3.5 million should be discussed at the committee levels. And again, that's up to TAB and the Funding and Programming, this committee and TAC to kind of vet that out further, but one recommendation that's coming out of the study. So with that, Mr. Chair, I think I'll turn it back to you. I did see Katie White put in the chat here a few locations that are getting improvements that we can note on some of our maps. So I do appreciate that. Those were 2 locations on Hiawatha. I think she had mentioned 26th and Lake Street, or the 2 intersections. So back to you, and would like to see if people have any comments or questions for either Paul, Michael, or myself.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. So yeah, I will open it up to the committee members for questions or comments. Got a quiet group today. I'm not seeing any hands raised. If you have a question, yeah, just jump in here.
Chair, there were a couple of questions in the chat from Katie White.
All right, let me pull that up here.
You've already got them.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Okay, so nothing to address further, Katie?
Yep, you're good.
All right. All right, see, Paul, all that hard work and no questions. Must be good information and good coverage of the topic through the presentation.
Very
Yeah,
good. Thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
no, this is great. A lot of useful information, and yeah, I think this is great information.
We appreciate all our partners' help on that too. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and as you know, as people start thinking about funding pursuits too, and how they can use this study if they want maps. We don't have the final report done and posted, but in the intervening time, if people do want maps or other things, we'd be happy to pass those along, and you can use those in your funding applications, and with the goal of bringing more money to the metro area in the end here too. So.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you all for presenting on this topic and great information. And we will move on to the next item, which is our last item for today, the program year and scope change policy. So this will be just some coverage of that. And looks like Joe, you're up here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the two policies that we've been talking about quite a bit. In fact, several of you even brought up points that will probably come up during the process to re-examine these policies. So attached are the policies themselves, along with some notes on some of the things we might be talking about when we discuss the policies. And so I'll start by saying that I did put out a notice seeing if there's any interest in participating. We have a lot of county representation, some transit representation. Maybe one or two more cities would be beneficial, but we do have a decent number overall. But some have suggested, I think we only have one city participant that has agreed to participate. Anyway, let us know, let me know if you are interested. So we'll start here with the scope change policy. And so the scope change policy was really established to, well, as it says, to change the scope, but I think to review whether or not a scope should be changed. So I think when you look at the history, we sort of stepped away from a very precise interpretation of what a score would have been to try to get more of a sense of whether or not a project is still doing roughly what it says it's going to be doing. But one thing that's happened a lot lately is that we've seen a lot of changes to remove project elements and put them elsewhere. And this doesn't seem like it's like something that's probably going away. So I think that's really the impetus for why we're looking at this policy because we've done a lot of those in recent history. We've not taken federal funding when we're moving funds from, or we're moving project elements from here, having it in elsewhere, and we keep the federal funding intact. That's something that I don't think necessarily a lot of people have disputed or have thought is right or wrong. It's just something that maybe needs to be captured in a discussion and whether or not this is the approach to go, and rather than setting precedent, kind of creating policy. I think some of the other topics are maybe differences involving transit. I think that's something that kind of shows through a lot of our policies. They're written sort of more with maybe bike ped and highways in mind. Whether there's transit differences, I think is a question. You'll see some other potential topics here. Whether we have the opportunity to take a smaller change that maybe would be considered informal, and Colleen Brown and Elaine and I do approve a number of informal scope changes, but we've been hesitant, I in particular have been hesitant to do that if the applicant is asking to retain funds that maybe technically could be considered to go away, whether there could be an amount of money where we don't have to wrestle with that. Whether HSIP should have any different instructions. Thus far, they haven't. It's been a little bit point of confusion at times, things like that. So the other policy we're going to look at is the program year policy, and you might have noticed there's a lot of things that have been happening there that are maybe a little different than we're used to. The program year policy was designed to address a lot of projects that weren't getting completed on time probably 10 years ago. And when that policy was enacted, there was a lot of success there. We haven't had as much of a problem with that. But what we have been seeing is a lot of projects sort of being enveloped into larger projects, and we might want to re-examine, whether the policy should accommodate those kind of things, or whether we should have more of a bent that when this happens, you're kind of out of luck because you can no longer meet your program year, or there are other ways in the program year policy to address that, or other ways to address independent utility, because it seems like a lot of these projects are sort of losing if they ever had independent utility. And then again, I think we're going to examine whether transit needs different rules, because FTA and FHWA have far different policies when it comes to how flexible funding is and whether or not you can advance instruct and things of that nature. Again, HSIP could be a factor there. And so other sort of things. And then somebody brought up whether or not we can talk about defederalization to create some flexibility. That's something that you might remember we talked about maybe 5 or 6 years ago that ran into some difficulties, and that may or may not, if we do go down that road, it may or may not result in actually a different policy, but it is a discussion as to how we can sort of add to the flexibility to enable program year shifting to be easier on applicants and on the program. So that's really all I have. Again, if people want to participate, they can. Otherwise, you can ask questions of myself and the staff now or later. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Questions or comments for Joe? All right, Joe, and you said you were looking for maybe a Metro City volunteer?
That would be, yeah, I think so. And maybe one is enough because we do have a decent number, but I think we have somebody from the city of Minneapolis that's volunteered, and I think that's about it for cities. And then I will probably be sending a doodle poll for like the first meeting, kickoff meeting, maybe next week. So we're looking at maybe early October for meeting. And we are going to talk about both policies in the same group based on the interest of people that have volunteered at this point. Most people are interested in both.
Okay. It looks like, okay, great. Robert Ellis in the chat said he would volunteer. So if you could include him, I think he would be a great representative for the cities on that committee.
Will do. I see Cole's hand up.
Okay, yeah, I can't see the hands for some reason. Cole?
Yeah, let's reiterate something I told the staff internally, that I think with the regional solicitation evaluation coming up, that there's an opportunity to do two things. Number one, to look at how other regions handle these issues, and maybe there's some scope element that the consultant could look at peer regions, or we can try to pull together some information internally. I can't imagine this is an issue unique to this region, but I haven't seen any other similar policies from other regions. So just to see if there's anything we could learn. The second broader point is with a regional solicitation evaluation coming up, I think, this is an interim solution, but there's a possibility we could restructure the entire solicitation, and it might open up a whole lot of other ideas that might impact scope policy and program year stuff. So just keeping that in mind, I think it's almost like a Band-Aid to get us to the next solicitation, and probably get us through 5 years of funding or so, but that we should, revisit this when we have a new solicitation structure to see if there's any issues that come up that might need to be addressed again. So more of a longer term thinking comment and seeing how we can incorporate some of this into that regional solicitation project. But recognizing we still need a near term solution for projects that are coming through. So.
Great, thank you for that feedback, Cole.
Chair, I have a quick question for Joe as well. Will the goal of this committee be to look at what other, I know you mentioned other ATPs, what they're doing, but what are the bare bone minimums that we would have to do? And maybe where has our region maybe gone above and beyond, or maybe restricted, like we plug in just a certain fiscal year that you can only use funding for, whereas maybe the requirements are, it could just be with anywhere within like the 5-year window, things like that. So just wondering if kind of setting parameters of where we're choosing to do something different than what maybe the minimum requirements are.
Chair and Darren, I'm not entirely following that. I don't think we had planned on anything in comparison to other ATPs. I think we're in a different situation than some of those, but certainly that doesn't mean we can't compare ourselves to them. In terms of the 5 years you suggest, as we did have a discussion with MnDOT, and it seems to me that there's not a lot of wiggle room in the federal years that we have, at least with FHWA. That changes with FTA. But with FHWA, we don't usually have a lot of years to play with for the funds. So if we do any program year changing, the program has to rectify that somehow by advancing other projects or whatever. I think we're kind of stuck there, but I might be misunderstanding your question.
Darren, are you getting at more of, do other MPOs have more flexibility with when applicants can maybe choose a year for delivery, or do you want to maybe clarify your question?
Correct. Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's weighing out what is allowable with FHWA and MnDOT constraints. Is there the possibility to have more of a window of years that you could complete a project, just knowing maybe a certain year is where you're plugged in for your funding allocation to be, but you could complete the project anywhere within those 2 to 3 years, if that's even a possibility. I'm just curious if we over the years have just developed some practices, maybe some for very good reasons too, but is there some flexibility there that maybe we're not allowing ourselves at this point in time?
Chair and Darren, I think we'll talk about that, and maybe that'll be some of the background information we start with that I'm not entirely going to answer right now. But you know, and first of all, even defining what we mean by complete a project, I think we're talking about the letting, which has to be, as far as I know, and we'll talk about whether somebody can correct me, for FHWA projects, we're pretty rigidly in between the first and last day of a 12-month fiscal year. But we'll talk about that as we get in. I think I saw your name on I think I got your name, I should say, on the volunteer list. We'll talk about that as we get into the early meetings maybe. But, and whether or not we're doing anything sort of, because we do things in the solicitation that are definitely beyond what FHWA or FTA requires us. I do think a lot of the scope change or the program year policy is really driven by FHWA's lack of flexibility in a program year. But I think we'll make sure that we're on the same page in that as we get into the meeting process.
Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. It's a great question that Darren raises. We did meet with, and Joe kind of alluded to this a little bit, we did meet with Brian Gage and Patrick Weideman at MnDOT, as the money flows first through MnDOT and then to us. And they told us there is, from their standpoint, there's not flexibility in the year, at least for the highway projects. Once it moves to FTA, Joe said, you know, there is flexibility, but it doesn't help Carver County probably. But could there be more flexibility somehow in the years and the program years extensions? I think the answer is yes to that. But MnDOT is going to give us a chunk of money and does have an expectation that we spend that chunk of money in that program year. Whether it's on those projects or different projects coming in and out, I think is up to the group to kind of work through. But if that helps answer your question, because I was kind of curious too from MnDOT, like, oh, shouldn't we have like 3 years to deliver these projects? And they said, well, no, we need to deliver this, say $100 million a year of our money, or else it goes back. So.
Okay. No, thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Right. Looks like we have Cole.
Yeah, just to take it back to the earlier conversation on Southwest, helpful for this group to look at, elements that are part of projects that maybe aren't essential to the scoring and have some specific language around that. The reason I bring it up is not just transit, but we have all these TDM small projects, and I don't think we've ever had a scope change for one of them, but save us if we did, because that'd be really hard for us to interpret, I think, if it's, still delivering some of those elements. So maybe some generic language could be developed that allows us to have some guidance there. And you just look at all the categories and see if there's elements that are like non-essential and not scored, but could impact a scope change request.
All right, thank you, Cole. Anyone else want to weigh in or have questions? Okay, seeing none. Okay, and Joe, and you said next steps here, you're going to send out a poll to get some meetings set up and start the discussion. I assume the committees will be kept updated, over time on this.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else for this item, Joe?
Mr. Chair, I don't believe so.
Okay. Elaine, I saw you pop up here. Did you have anything?
Just for other business.
Okay.
I popped in.
and that's where we're moving. So that concludes our informational items. We have next on the agenda, other business. Elaine?
I just wanted to let everybody know, announcement went out for the regional solicitation overview webinar. Is scheduled for next Thursday. Let me schedule up here. At 10:30. What we'll do is, I think we'll have Joe send out an announcement to all the communities to it, like we do with the Gov delivery, in case there's some communities that haven't seen the general announcement that went out. And similar to previous years, this webinar is just an overview of the changes with the solicitation. Everybody on this committee is aware of that, of those changes that went through, and then the application itself is expected to open up online by the end of September. We have finished testing the web grants portion of it, so that is working, and the next step is testing our mapping application, so we are getting close. And then as soon as we know within the next week about the mapping applications, we'll set up the training sessions for web grants and the mapping applications. It'll be similar to the previous years where we do have the recorded training sessions currently uploaded, so we'll be doing the same training sessions. So if you just want to go online and on our solicitation webpage and review those videos, you can do that. So we'll just have one training session for web grants and one for the mapping to answer questions that people might have. And those would be sometime early October. So.
Okay, thanks. And Maddie had a question. Where on the website is the latest schedule for the regional solicitation?
So on a regional solicitation webpage on the left, you'll see a tab for applying for the regional solicitation. On that page, we keep up to date next steps where we're at. And right now we have a registration available open for the webinar for that overview webinar. It's a quick form, fill in your name, email, and we can send you the webinar invite. It'll be done over WebEx. And one of our staff is going to be opening that up and recording the presentations also. So no, thanks. Oh, no, that's here. I can just pop it into the chat.
Okay. All right, and then I see Steve Peterson shared the IIJA match program. So those of you that have received funding for IIJA, MnDOT, recently, I think probably from Ted Schonecker, had sent out an email to many of those applicants or all of those applicants about the match program that was approved through the legislative session. Steve, you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, you probably know as much as I do, to tell you the truth, but yeah, there's $216.4 million. So it's on a first come first served basis. But if you do win an IIJA discretionary grant, does not include the regional solicitation as a federal grant, but raised, infra, mega, reconnecting communities, safe, the safe one, safe streets and roads for all, including planning grants, all those, you can get whatever the match amount is, the locally required match, you can get that funded through this $216.4 million set aside that the legislature has. So don't lose that money. If you can take advantage of it, that would be great. So.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, I know Plymouth, we got a raise grant. We've already put in our request for this matching program. So yeah, anybody who has received IIJA money, strongly encourage you to get that submitted as soon as possible through MnDOT. All right, anything else for other business from members? All right, seeing none. I did want to recognize Ken Ashfeld. He is retiring from the city of Maple Grove. I think he only has a few weeks left, but he was a Metro Cities appointment here representing on TAC and funding and programming, and just want to, I know he's not on today, but just want to thank him for his service. So with
Metro
that,
City, I was gonna say, Metro Cities has posted a recruitment for, so if you know of any other city members that be interested in serving, tell them to apply with Metro Cities to serve on funding TAC and possibly funding and programming.
yeah, great reminder. Thank you, Elaine. Yes. All right, with that, next item is adjournment. So we will move to adjourn at 3:08. So thank you everybody for your time and attention today. Thank you.